Imagine for a second, a UFC universe without Conor McGregor. No proper 12 whiskey, no who the is that guy.
Who the fuck is that guy? Who the fuck?
Memes, and definitely no infamous bus attack.
Unreal, man.
Oh, we gotta get a medic. Get a medic.
But here's the million-dollar question. Without the Mystic Mac phenomenon, what exactly would the UFC look like today? First, let's rewind to José Aldo, the Brazilian legend who stood atop the featherweight division unbeaten for a decade. Before December 12, 2015, Aldo was untouchable, but McGregor shattered that in 13 seconds.
Conor relaxed and smiling. Oh! Just left him!
Without that infamous left hook from Conor, Aldo's reign likely continues. Instead of chasing redemption, Aldo defends his title successfully against names like Frankie Edgar, Chad Mendes, and possibly a younger Max Holloway. We could have been talking about Aldo as the greatest pound-for-pound fighter, not as the guy who got clipped in the most replayed KO in UFC history. But what about Nate Diaz? Stockton's pride turned mainstream superstar thanks to McGregor. Without Conor, Nate probably remains a cult hero, respected in hardcore circles, but nowhere near as financially successful.
How much do you want to be worth, Nate? What kind of money do you want to make?
More than everybody.
Diaz cashed in on McGregor's spotlight, becoming a household name practically overnight. Without their legendary feud, would Nate even have landed massive paydays or headlined Madison Square Garden? Probably not. Diaz's journey might have been more gritty underdog and less iconic superstar. Speaking of superstars, Khabib Nurmagomedov. Without Conor, Khabib remains undefeated, but his legacy shifts dramatically. Remember UFC 229? Without the chaos of that rivalry, the bad blood, and that insane post-fight melee, Khabib's stardom doesn't skyrocket. But here's the juicy part. Without the Conor distraction, Khabib versus Tony Ferguson almost certainly happened. No curse cancellations, no global pandemics derailing plans, just Tony Ferguson in his prime against an untested Khabib. Does Ferguson's unorthodox style and relentless pressure finally expose Khabib's weaknesses? Sadly, we'll never truly know. But one thing is certain, this fight would have reshaped the lightweight division entirely. What about the recently retired legend Dustin Poirier? Without Conor's rivalry propelling him into mainstream stardom,
Hands at his hips, having a conversation, looking to finish the fight.
Poirier may have continued climbing the ranks quietly, possibly becoming an undisputed champion. Without the setbacks from his high-profile losses and rematches with McGregor, Poirier might have established a dominant title reign, solidifying a legacy based purely on skill rather than narrative drama. Let's consider Eddie Alvarez. Without the overwhelming loss to Conor at UFC 205, Alvarez's lightweight title reign may have endured longer. Perhaps Eddie solidifies his spot as one of the division's all-time greats, rather than being remembered primarily for his defeat to McGregor. His career could have been defined by battles with Khabib, Tony Ferguson, or even a rematch with Poirier that shapes the division in different ways. And Max Holloway, without that early loss to McGregor, Holloway's journey to stardom might have accelerated dramatically. Perhaps his rivalry with Aldo would have taken center stage earlier, allowing him to shine brighter sooner. Holloway might have become the promotional face of the featherweight division, redefining the weight class with his relentless striking and charismatic personality much earlier.
That looked like Max Holloway going by on a skateboard there.
It might be him, because I know he's been skateboarding a lot.
Yeah, that was Max Holloway on a skateboard.
And let's talk about that BMF title. Without McGregor elevating Nate Diaz into mainstream consciousness, would the UFC have ever created a spectacle belt purely based on bravado? Probably not. Jorge Masvidal's explosive resurrection might have remained a hardcore fan story, never translating into casual fan dollars. Nate Diaz and Masvidal might have been exciting fighters, but without Conor blazing the trail, the BMF belt is nothing more than a wild fantasy. And then there's the money fighter pay, branding, and marketability. Before McGregor, UFC fighters weren't making massive seven-figure paydays, and certainly no one talked openly about equity stakes. Conor's bold negotiations forced the UFC's hand, dramatically increasing compensation standards across the board. Without McGregor, does a Dustin Poirier ever earn life-changing money? Does a guy like Israel Adesanya ever command major sponsorship deals as easily? Conor didn't just raise the ceiling, he demolished it. Think about pay-per-view numbers too. McGregor was box office gold. Without him headlining cards, does the UFC explode globally, landing lucrative deals like ESPN? Possibly not. Conor's crossover appeal drew new audiences by the millions, people who'd never watched MMA before. Without that, the sport likely grows slower, more organically, without explosive leaps into mainstream culture. But who fills Conor's shoe in this alternate timeline? Maybe Max Holloway becomes the charismatic face the UFC needed, his Hawaiian charm lighting up the camera. Perhaps Dustin Poirier channels his gritty authenticity into major stardom earlier. Or maybe, without Conor overshadowing him, Tony Ferguson's eccentricity becomes legendary far beyond just hardcore fans. The UFC always finds stars, but would any shine as brightly or uniquely as Conor McGregor? Looking back, it's clear how one Irish fighter reshaped an entire sport, altering the fates of fighters, changing the economics of combat sports, and forever shifting how we see MMA. So here's the final question I'll leave you with. Is the UFC better off having Conor McGregor's controversial brilliance, or did his immense shadow ultimately hold other fighters back? And how has his numerous controversies and outside the cage antics, not to mention his legal dramas, affected his legacy? I'll be taking the comments below. Hit that like button if you enjoyed this trip through UFC alternate history. And if you're feeling the vibe, hit the subscribe. I'm Reggie Cross for Behind the Lines. And remember, hype fades, legacy don't. Peace. 745